tell you, did I? And if people think that we're going to stop fighting for our freedom and liberty, they got something coming. Welcome tonight on Friday night to Stand Up, Stand Out America with yours truly, La Conservadora Tejana, Bianca Gracia. Tonight, I have my dear friend, special guest, Jaeson Jones, joining me on our show today. This is just a very important topic. Most of you know I speak out a lot and advocate, for our Border Patrol agents, for our law enforcement regarding the open border and all of the illegal immigration issues we have and what we've had actually since 2021. If most of you remember, I myself declared vocally that we had an invasion going on at the Texas southern border since March of 2021. And I was told, Bianca, you can't say that. But I could actually say that. The numbers weren't coming out, but we already knew that there was a problem and an issue when the, commander-in-chief left in January of 2021, and we knew that we were going to have some major issues. So I wanted to bring an expert on tonight, to really talk about, this is a law enforcement, retired captain in the DPS. And has a wealth of knowledge, is well known for, obviously through his experience, in law enforcement, what we're facing and what we're up against. And so there's no one better than to really talk about the truth about what's going on in our southern borders, is Jaeson Jones. And so Jaeson, I want to thank you for taking your time to come on our show tonight. I know you have a very busy schedule, and I want you to just take the time that you need to really educate our viewership, especially, across the nation, but especially within the communities here in Texas. Tell us what really is happening at our southern border. And first of all, just tell everybody a little bit about yourself.
No, listen, Bianca, it's always great to be with you, as you know, and thank you for having me today. I truly mean that. Listen, I'm just like everybody else, a frustrated citizen who is absolutely tired of what was happening at the border and in Mexico, and watching how these cartels had become absolutely hyper-violent against Mexican citizens, and knowing that what they were doing, not only to Mexican citizens, but to migrants, that was coming here. And that I wasn't going to sit back and be quiet as somebody who had built programs to go after the leadership of some of these cartels, specifically the Los Zetas, and who are one of the most hyper-violent cartels in Mexico. And so after retiring as a captain in the Texas Department of Public Safety's Intelligence and Counterterrorism Division, I went public to try to get them designated as foreign terrorist organizations, to try to stop exactly what we see today. I think most Americans think of what's happening at our southwest border, Bianca, through the lens of immigration, and for good reason. Look at how long we have been talking about this immigration issue at the southwest border and in our country. The problem, though, is that what that has allowed is for the masking of these cartels' evolution into a parallel government. And with that, coming the largest U.S. intelligence failure since 9/11. And I say this all the time publicly on national news. I say it privately, and I'll say it here. And that is that what we are really witnessing with these cartels is the most significant national security and public safety threat to the American people. The problem is that when most of the national media talks about the border, and they talk about what's happening in Mexico, they talk about it through the lens of immigration. And I don't take away anything from what we're seeing on the immigration issue. That's not what I'm trying to do here. But I'm also trying to make us very aware that the cartel's adjustment from human smuggling into the trafficking of people is like we have never seen. The weaponization of fentanyl, from creating regular fentanyl to parafentanyl to serafentanyl, and now lacing it with xylazine, also known as tranq on the streets, is causing the worst overdose death poisonings in American history. There is no terrorist organization in the world, Bianca, who have killed as many Americans, as many Mexican citizens, and you can even break that down by country if you want separately, as these cartels. The problem is that the American people have not been told. And that's exactly what I'm trying to do, because I'm a firm believer. I don't have to sell the border crisis. I don't have to sell what's happening to Mexican citizens and to our own citizens. All I have to do is illuminate it and show the American people. And once they see it, they're going to say this is not acceptable, because I think any reasonable and prudent American would not agree that what these cartels are doing to people in Mexico, in our country, and around the world is absolutely unacceptable.
Absolutely. I know that you obviously go on Newsmax and you try to speak out as much as you can. You're on the Border 911, with Tom Homan, that y'all are doing events for Border 911, trying to bring this to the forefront. I can tell you, I was in Michigan last year at some point in time, and there was we were having a rally in front of the Capitol, and I don't know if these I don't know. They're Spanish. I mean, they were either Mexican, or they were of some Hispanic, Mexican. They were Latino, and they came to show up. And I don't know if somebody told them to come show up, but they came to show up in front of the Capitol, and they were advocating for wanting driver's license. Now, they were illegal, but they were advocating that they wanted driver's license because they were working, and so most people won't go and talk to these people. They'll just say, oh, they're protesting, whatever. And then they try to, but I said, no, I'm gonna go talk to them. I want to know what is it that they think we owe them. Right. So I went and had a conversation with them, and sure enough, I could hear, I get what they were trying to say. They said, look, we've had to drive across state lines to go get a license because we have jobs and we have to get to work and we don't have license. And I'm like, but you're here illegally. So, I try to have this conversation with them.
Yeah.
And so, and literally, I said, I get what you're trying to say. And so the system is completely broken on the illegal end. Yes, it is. But the thing is that I started to tell them, because most of them that were there were telling me they'd been in the United States and living in Michigan for 10, 20 years. They've been there for a long time, and they were older. So, I don't know, maybe they were, maybe they haven't, who knows?
Sure.
But here was the thing. I started to tell them, and I said, about what's going on at the border. And I started to explain to them about all the illegal immigration, about all these women and children are getting raped, how unaccompanied minors, we don't know, they're going missing. We don't know where they're at. I started to tell them about the drugs pouring in, started to tell them about the cartels. And they literally were telling me I was a liar. And I said, absolutely not. And they said, that's not happening. And I said, so I started to pull up, just like yours. I went to your TikTok. I went to, just some of the other independent journalists who are bringing, light to this. And I said, you need to follow these people. This is what's happening at the southern border. They were jaws dropped, and they said, and I said, here's the date. I'm not lying to you. This is not something that happened 10 years ago and they're just trying to, this is happening every night. You guys need to see what's happening. They were in awe because nowhere in the news, nowhere in their Telemundo, their local news, that it's mainstream media that they watch, because they don't watch independent, journalists.
Sure. Yeah.
So they had no idea what was happening. So Jaeson, I think that what you're saying is, it is extremely true that for the most part, look, people can go and do little sound bites on the Fox and CNN and MSNBC and CBS, NBC, but it's nowhere near highlighting what's really happening at the border. So when you go to these other states, they clearly do not know. So I said, you got to follow these people. This is what's happening. And guess what, guys? You've been here working for 10, 20 years and you're advocating that you want a driver's license. Meanwhile, all these illegals are going to come over and they're going to underbid you for your work. And so what you've spent 10 years trying to get, a good paying job, is now all these illegals are going to come and undercut you. And they were like, oh, absolutely no way. I mean, they weren't having it, but it was all a little educational point. I just happened to be in front. So Jaeson, give us some realities, maybe some numbers or things that were from 2021. How bad is this? Because we're getting numbers on fentanyl. We're getting numbers on how many illegal crossings we've had, the getaway, all of that. Tell us how severe this is.
Sure. And I think it's a great point. And I love your story there too, because, I travel this country. I actually left you in Florida just last week and then went to New York and heard more stories just like what you're talking about, that people just don't know. They've not been told. And So let's talk about where we really are right now. In the last 6 months at your southwest border, and anyone, by the way, for anyone watching, go to U.S. Customs and Border Protection, type in southwest border numbers, and you can see exactly what I'm talking about here. Thankfully, the U.S. Customs and Border Protection publishes their data better than any other federal law enforcement agency. And in the last 6 months, just Border Patrol between the ports of entry have apprehended over 1 million people in 6 months. In 5 months, Chief Ortiz admitted before Congress that people from 159 different countries had crossed that southern border in 5 months. So when you hear me say publicly that we have never seen or been where we are right now, the data validates that. You can look at it historically, going back to 1960. Now, in that same time frame, CBP have apprehended 80 individuals on the FBI terrorism watch list at the southern border and 2 at the northern border, so for a total of 82. And if that's not enough, you say, well, okay, well, how does that impact me in New York? Or how does that impact me in Philadelphia?
Right.
Well, here's how it impacts you. Because when those large numbers of people, when you see on your TV screens, are crossing the southern border and it looks like an immigration issue, what you can't see is how the Halcon Network and the Falcons and the Lookouts are sending deadly drugs up and down river, because now they've taken up all the resources of local, state, and federal law enforcement, and they coordinate their operations to be able to move in fentanyl, which is killing Americans and impacting all of us. In the South, we feel the problem in a little differently than those of you in the North. We feel it through the adjustment from human smuggling into the trafficking, bailouts, splashdowns, caltrop deployments, stash houses. Right now, you feel it at a much different level than we do. Not that you don't have those things, but you feel it mostly in overdose deaths from fentanyl, parafentanyl, serafentanyl, and fentanyl laced with xylazine that last year in 2022 so far has killed 106,000 Americans. And then in 2021, 110,000 and of those, to be frank, about 75% are synthetic opioids that are the cause of those numbers. Here's another issue that's not being talked about to the American people, and that is that the CDC, their data set is between 6 and 9 months behind in the collection of blood samples from people who have passed away. So when you hear 106,000, that's not correct. Usually it's behind a few months. We're at 6 to 9 months because there are so many people dying right now that there's not enough pathologists to keep up with it. So this is going to get worse until we take on the problem. And everything that I just said to you is linked to one thing, and that is the Mexican cartels, who have care, custody, and control of the plazas along our border. They have evolved from organized crime into an insurgency, into terrorism, and truly into a parallel government where we see them today. And I will tell you right now, if we do not take on these cartels, if we don't get the tools of national power to truly disrupt their networks and not just go after the head of the snake using a Department of Justice model, we will continue to see them grow in size. We will continue to see more overdose deaths. And the new slave trade, as I call it, will continue to grow. Because get ready. If you think that you have known the smuggling and trafficking world in the United States, what has happened in the last 2 years, get ready. In the next 5 years, there won't be a law enforcement agency not working human trafficking.
Well, Jaeson, I'm glad you brought that up, because everything goes back to the cartel. That's what I want you to explain to our audience, is that, because you're right. Look, everybody wants to look at it at the illegal, oh, poor people, and they're fleeing to, their socialist countries, or they have no jobs, or whatever that they want to come up with on the elite. But nobody really realizes that it's the cartel who is driving this. Now, I've seen our own Border Patrol, National Border Patrol, tweet out last year in August, we no longer have control of our border. That's a huge statement being said by our own Border Patrol agents, who are the ones who are at the front line of, making sure that our national sovereignty is in place. And so that, they're protecting our border. When they say we no longer have control of our border, that was last August. So Jaeson, that's very concerning to me. as a citizen in Texas, knowing that our own law enforcement have no control of the border. And to now hear from you that the cartel is actually the ones behind this. How are we going to actually stop this? Because this, you're talking about from 2021 to 2022 to say, hey, we have no longer control of our southern border. And then now we are in 2023. By the time 2024 comes along and any other year, how are we actually really going to get this under control? Because right now, I have sources in Austin who are telling me that there's actual elected officials having to be removed from their positions on committees because the cartel is targeting their families.
Mhm. It's a great question. Let me first tell you, how do the cartels have operational control? Because, most of those talking heads that go on national television, Bianca, if you notice, they love to come up with these little one-liner zingers, but they never can explain to the American people how the Halcon network, who works and collaborates with the cartels, truly conduct this control. So it's a very, very important point, because what is happening on the national stage right now is that you see where they are trying to separate, and you hear this from DHS Secretary Mayorkas, they're trying to separate the immigration issue from the transnational national security issue. And you can't do it. One goes with the other. Now, let me explain to you the why and how they really do this. I have seen Halcons, Falcons, also known as lookouts, scouts, whatever you want to call them, who work and contract directly for the Gulf Cartel, operating up to 30 miles in South Texas. Now, in the old days, they used to use Motorola two-way handheld encrypted radios, which would communicate back to Central, what they call Central or Central.
Right.
Depending upon which cartel that you're talking about, that cartel coordinates with a boss. That Halcon controls and coordinates with a boss in the Mexico. So now I'm talking about the group on our side right now. I'm not talking about anyone on Mexico side.
Right.
So what they do is they check on and they check off just like law enforcement. Some work at 8 hours, some work at 10 hours, some work a 12-hour shift. Today, they've become a lot more advanced. They use mostly encrypted apps like Zello, because they're much lower in the ranking within the cartel infrastructure and world. But when they operate 24/7, 365, they never shut down. And the worse the weather in South Texas, the more product they move. Now, that product can be all kinds of things. And the way it works is every bend in your river in South Texas is what the cartel calls a gate. So they'll have so many hawks on the U.S. side and so many hawks on the Mexico side. And what they do is all day and all night, they watch law enforcement. That's their job. They want to know where every Border Patrol agent is, every Border Patrol agent on the ground walking, aircraft, they call them out, and they communicate that back to what I was telling you, known as Central. And Central then gives orders. And once they say a gate is open, okay, that's when they'll move whatever commodity they want to move. And if they don't have a gate open they want open, well, then what they'll do is they'll push large numbers of people, they'll call in a bomb threat to a port of entry, and they'll cause law enforcement to surge in certain areas. Then what they do is that's when they'll push runners. Runners are usually used as kind of a guide for these hawks to determine whether the gate is truly open or not. And if they get through, then that's when they start moving deadly drugs. The problem here, Bianca, is that these talking heads on these national television shows who have these fantastic three-letter acronym background names and PhDs and every other thing on them have no experience on the ground.
Right.
So here they talk on national television, and they don't have a clue how these things really take hold. So when you see large groups of people on the southern border, what you need to know is that the cartels are winning. That's all by design, the reason you see all of them at one location. Those family units are give-ups. Then from there on the sides, they push runners, and then from there, they push the drugs. And that's how it really works. So that's how they maintain control of our border. Now, on the Mexico side, a cartel is not a gang. They truly have control of everything from the police level, the state police level, most of the federal level, especially along our border region. And I've literally been on Title III affidavits, or Title III investigations, where we're listening to the plaza boss. Let's say, I can give you a good one here, Metro Tres, who was a good crook who worked for the cartel, for the Gulf Cartel in Reynosa. He ran the plaza, and he was highly respected. And we've been on the phone when a general from the Mexican military calls in and says, hey, I'm coming in. when and where do you want to meet to discuss payment. This is
Wow.
how they control different areas in Mexico. And then that plaza boss, who may not be the capo over the entire organization, that plaza boss is truly controlling the movement of some legitimate goods, but also illicit goods. And that's how it really works.
That sounds extremely organized. I'm an organizer, I'm an advocate, I'm a grassroots person, so I know what it takes. It's a lot to even get 100 people organized, even 25 people organized. This is sounds what you're describing is like it's so operationally organized. I mean, this is not some like little, hey, I'll send a couple of people over here just to do this. This sounds like they have extremely, in years, from what I've heard you say in the past, is that they have the evolution of the cartel is no longer what anybody could see, watching Godfather or Goodfellas. I mean, this is extremely, and this is beyond movies, right? You've got to have a sophisticated system with technology, mind you, and the
Well,
right people in
I
it.
love that. I love what you're saying right now, because if America, now I'm just giving you the Halcon network. When you get higher in the hierarchy within the cartels, the tradecraft and the technology that they're leveraging regarding their radio programs, which I don't talk about much publicly because the capabilities, there's no terrorist organization in the world that can communicate the way they do. They are making billions of dollars, Bianca. And so they're going to maintain their communications because they will tell you it is the lifeblood of their organizations. And it's stunning, the technology they're using. This is also how they got into the military grade weaponry, because the Zetas brought two things to the cartels. They brought discipline and they brought tradecraft. You see, they were former special forces who absconded to go to work for OCL Cardenas, who was the leader of the Gulf cartel. And they were extremely loyal. You'd go buy dope from these cartel members, Bianca, and you're going to do a dope deal with them at 7 o'clock. Hell, that dope deal may go at 9 or 10 at night, right? Because we were on doper time. When the Zetas came on board, if they said they were going to be somewhere at 7 o'clock, they were there at 6:30, ready for the operation. That's where the discipline came. So what happened across the board in Mexico is everybody, one, wanted to be a commando, which is what they brought to that world, and two, all the other cartels were forced to rise to the occasion, because if they didn't, the Zetas were taking over very rapidly, very quickly. And so that was really that adjustment from organized crime into the insurgency, because they brought military grade weaponry, they brought encryption, they brought tradecraft and discipline. And that's how the Sinaloans, for example, got Los Anthrax. That's how the Juarez cartel got La Linea, or the line. They all began creating enforcement wings. And with that came more and more tradecraft that put them more and more in power to take over Mexico, to truly become a parallel government, as we all see has been occurring in that country now.
Well, Jason, I mean, I don't know if you're aware of this, but I mean, I've been an advocate speaking on this, invasion. I call it an invasion at the Texas border, and I've advocated for our sheriffs. There was 31 sheriffs that signed, a declaration or some kind of petition to ask the governor here to declare an invasion. And there was a lot of, back and forth, and the governor put in the Lone Star operation. And, I've been, it's like, they give us these nice little newspaper articles and optics and saying, oh, this is going really great. And we've captured this many people. We've stopped this many, we've got this, much dope off the streets, and all these little things. But yet our officers, law enforcement officers, are overworked, completely overworked, where they're working 70 hours a week, maybe sometimes even 80 hours a week. They're fatigued. And our border patrol, and then, they're trying to send in like the guard, to reinforce, but yet these numbers are still climbing. Fentanyl still getting in. So it's like, you have to ask yourself, how successful is this Lone Star operation anyway? We've spent so much money. Wouldn't it have been easier just to declare the invasion, shut the border down, and then deal with the aftermath, of things, and figuring out strategically, getting in all your law enforcement agencies, your guard, everybody that you have at your dispense, your resources, and saying, okay, how do we now open up just the point of, how do we actually secure our border? Because then you have well, it's not a state issue, it's a federal issue. Well, yeah, it's a federal issue, and everybody's trying to, bounce this whole thing back and forth about whose issue really it is really. But Texas does have a constitution, and that's what we were saying. Look, in Article 1, Section 10, it gives the governor permission to declare an invasion if you are being invaded in your state, and then you put in your resources. So this has now become a very politicized thing. Now, I'm a mother. I have children. I have to worry about them. Not only, healthcare. I can say that our healthcare system, not just COVID has totally, come after it, but now we have to worry about all the illegals that are coming in. They have to get healthcare, services, and then education services. Then, not to mention all the crime on the streets, because I feel that once you have lawlessness, even from the border, it kind of spills all into the rest of the state and then the rest of the country. There's a level of lawlessness that the criminals are not being dealt with. So they get a little bit more emboldened and say, I can pretty much run the streets now because that nothing's going to, happen to me. And here in the Houston area, we've got DA who is totally lets people out on murder, on bond after murdering someone to just go murder someone else. So these criminals are emboldened to run around our cities lawlessly and selling, pushing these drugs now, like you said, fentanyl, maybe they're pushing them off to be another drug, but our kids are getting killed. And I'm thinking, how in the world are we really going to get this under control? Even if we get another Republican into office in the White House, that changes the dynamics of things, because things were a lot better, under Trump, and people, are now realizing that. But when we get someone else into office, I'm really afraid that this whole cartel is really advanced into Texas. Like you said, 30 miles into Texas. How are we really going to get control of this border again, Jason? Because it's out of control.
Well, it absolutely is, but it is also very fixable. And just to be very clear, when I said that they're 30 miles into the country, that's just the Halcon network. The operators who are operating in every county in Texas, by the way, there's not one county where the cartel's not operating in Texas. And I can tell you that as somebody who retired in 2016. At one point, we looked back over I want to say it was a 5-year period, and we'd had over 3,000 criminal investigations directly linked to the cartels in Texas. So, this isn't anything new. They are here, they live among us, they walk among us, and there are tens of thousands of them in this country. Now, here's how we fix it, because there are true solutions out there, Bianca, and I want to make sure, because I think there's a lot of people, just as you just said, that feel that, what in the hell do we do? We've been dealing with this so bad, and now the problem is gotten so egregious and impacting us in so many new ways. I don't disagree with you at all, and I will tell you, we are going to have to use tools of national power and change what we are doing and have complete new focuses. And let me get into that a little bit. How has this been allowed? Historically, going back to 1934, the Federal Bureau of Investigation's failure here is monumental. They utilized a system known as the Uniform Crime Reporting System, also known as UCR. And historically, it never captured transnational crime. So everything we've talked about today, drug trafficking, we've been in a supposed drug war for 60 years in this country, extortions, weapons trafficking, money laundering, human smuggling, human trafficking, caltrop deployments, splashdowns, and that list goes on. Murders linked to the cartels, murders linked to transnational criminal organizations. None of that is captured. But what is captured domestically is regular murder, right? But you can't link it to anything overseas. Outside the boundaries of our borders. Sexual assault, motor vehicle theft, and burglary, robbery, things like that, regular theft. 8 index crimes is all that has been captured until 2021. Now the FBI uses what they call their new system, NIBRS, National Incident-Based Reporting System. Much better, captures 52 new index crimes directly linked to transnational crime. Here's the problem. It was created in 1984, Bianca. It went live in 1988, and today in 2023, about 60+%, maybe 65% of law enforcement of the 18,000 agencies in this country use it. So if we as a nation can't get the little things right, we will never get the big things right. And you have to be able, and I can tell you as somebody that worked this extensively, if you can't see the movement of transnational crime and what crimes are impacting every state in this union, then you are never going to be in focus. And this is exactly why the FBI is so out of focus on what the problem impacting Americans are. This is the same reason ATF is out of focus. This is the same reason. Now, why aren't the local agencies out of focus? Because they're dealing with their public every day, where the federal agencies are so far removed from the day in, day out pressures of what Americans are feeling. Local law enforcement responds to a problem, something they've never seen before, and they say, hey, we've got to address this. But what happens with them? They don't have the investigative tools, the money to conduct these long-term investigations, so they bring in the state. So I want you to know that that's the first thing we've got to fix. We have to understand, amongst all states in this country, not over a 12-month period. I need to know, as a former operational guy for intelligence, what happened not 12 months ago, what happened 12 hours ago?
Right.
And how does that impact Texas or a county in this state or a city in this state? And if it happened in New York, I better know about it in the next 12 hours, right? And that's where that's how I became so active in this, because as we were trying to figure out, just how bad this problem really was, we were stunned when we created the Unified Command, and we were working with 171 different agencies along the border, and the amount of intelligence flowing in, we were stunned. So if you ever wonder, how does Texas get $4 billion of funding? Because they share that information with all the elected leaders at the state level and at the Senate. So when they need money, this is how Operation Lone Star is now a $4 billion, because they see it, they show it, and it helps to drive their operations. Now imagine where we would be as a nation if we were doing that in all 50 states. That's part of the major fix here. The other part of this is the terrorism designation. 3 main things you get from that. First is you get speed in the system, meaning that you can't be a terrorist in this country. So now I don't have to work a 2-year case on these cartel members. We pick them up and we move them from this country. Second, you always hear about follow the money investigations, right? Man, it sounds sexy. It sounds good. I mean, when you say it on national television, it just flows right off the tongue. Follow the money investigations. It really sounds sexy. Here's what they don't tell you. We've been doing it for over 20 years. It's an investigation, and investigations under Fourth Amendment domestically are always going to move extremely slowly. We as Americans want that. Our Fourth Amendment against unreasonable searches and seizures is one of the greatest things the founding fathers gave to us. And somebody that used to be a former narcotics agent and a lieutenant who approved search warrants for my agents, let me tell you, that is no joke. We take that extremely serious before we run a search warrant on somebody's home. It's a big deal. I mean, I can't stress to you. So what we're doing is we're putting speed in the system so that those investigations outside the country, not domestically, outside, now we can go seize those assets real time. We can seize their bank accounts real time, because you would be stunned how fast these cartels turn their cash into digital money and then move it from bank to bank into other assets. So, third and final thing is that by being a foreign terrorist organization, we're limiting your mobility. Sinaloa was in 54 countries, Bianca. CJNG, Cartel Jalisco New Generation, is in over 48. This is not a U.S.-Mexico issue. This is a global issue. So we build a unified command of countries across the world, and we crush them. And we use full spectrum operations. This will not be like what we did with Middle East terrorist organizations. We will do it completely more clandestine, working with host nations, arresting every one of the key nodes within the organization and within what we call the network strategy to truly disrupt these dark networks, because you would be stunned how important the accountants and how important their lawyers are in Mexico.
Oh, I
And
bet.
that's where you start. You don't start with the capitalists. And that's about as much as I'll get into network theory here,
Right.
because there's a
I
lot of
love
things I
that. I
don't
think
discuss. You know?
no, I know that, and there's some things you just can't say, but those are really good things because I think citizens need to understand. We all know the issues, especially in all of South Texas, all of the border towns. They are they are living this. They don't
Yeah,
have the
so true.
resources to maintain their own city, counties because of the influx of illegals coming through, and then everything that comes with it. All of the crime and the fentanyl, and like I keep saying, the human trafficking, the child trafficking. They can't deal with it, so we're feeling it. They know it. But I think a lot of people say, well, everybody knows the problem, everybody's talking about the problem. You can see sound bites, here and there and everywhere, through social media or media. But it's like, well, how do we solve it? And I love that you've brought three things to the table so that citizens and activists can say, oh, those are things that need to be done. But what people don't realize is that then people like me can take it and say, okay, these are what we need to tell our elected officials that we want them to do. This needs to be three priorities. Is that, we need to focus on these things so that we can get a handle of what's happening at the border and all the things that are coming with it. So I really love that. I was interviewed last week. Grant Stinchfield interviewed me,
Yeah,
and we were talking
know
about my
Grant
orca.
well. Great
Yeah,
guy.
we were talking about Mayorkas, and I'm like, I saw him in, even when Ted Cruz was telling him, do you know what these wristbands are? Now, Jason, I'm a stay-home mom. Primarily, it's always my first thing. I always say I'm a stay-home mom, and then I do everything else, my little community activism, and run an org and all that. But I said, even me, a stay-home mom, even I knew what the wristband was. How are you that disconnected? How are you the secretary and you don't even know what the wristbands are? Now, either Border Patrol didn't brief you on this or you chose to not pay attention to it. But I told Grant and I said, I mean, for crying out loud, if this is the kind of people you're appointing to be a secretary, and they don't even know what a wristband is, for crying out loud, you can probably go ahead and, fire him. You can even put me in because, I mean, if this kind of clown can hold this kind of office, well, gosh, it makes me feel so much better as a stay-home mom, and I have more knowledge than he does. Exactly. Those are the wristbands right there. Right there. Jason explains to us what, because I know what that is. But I
Yeah,
told Grant and I said, for crying out loud, I think I, as a stay-home mom, could be appointed to that position, and I would do a heck of a better job than what this guy's been able to do, because even I know the simplest things of what a wristband is. So, Jason, instead of me, because you're the
sure.
expert, tell our audience, what do those signify? What is that?
So I broke this story in February of 2021. And what happens here is that each one of these represent a different alien smuggling organization directly working for Cartel de Golfo, also known as CDG. And if you look at these wristbands, what you'll see here is it says Entraga, and then you see the little bear there. Each
Right?
one
I
has a
see there.
symbol, right?
Yeah.
And then it comes down here. It's got some footprints, and then it's got a number. I don't know if that number's coming across or not.
I can kind of see it. Yeah.
Each one has that, and on the back, some of them even have the name of the individual by
Wow.
the written on there who it's going to be assigned to in the stash house. So the way
Right.
these work is just as Border Patrol was having problems in February of 2021 keeping up with the massive influx of people that was suddenly hitting them, so were the cartels. And to them, every person is a commodity. I know that's hard for people to wrap their mind around, but it doesn't
Right.
matter if you're a man, woman, or child, they're a commodity. How could they also keep up with this mass number? And what they came up with were these wristbands. And Cartel de Golfo specifically was the first. Within 6 weeks, Bianca, they had moved 36.6 miles up the river from Roma, Texas, where all these different smugglers were using it because it was such a brilliant model. So here's how it works. When the migrant gets into a stash house on the Mexico side, and there are multiple stash houses because there's so many people that are crossing, when they get in there, what the cartel will do is they'll take their cell phone and they'll take all PII data they have, what we call personal identifying information, whether that is any form of ID, whatever it is. And they start writing all this down, who they are, their phone number, their cell phone. And by the way, most migrants have cell phones. That's another thing people aren't told.
Yeah.
And then they find out where they're going in the country, in our country. right? And they try everything they can to validate it, but they don't stop there. They also call back to the country of origin. They call their mother, they call their father, their grandparents, and they start validating all the family, their address, where they live. This is how they control these people. Once they get enough information, they give them a wristband. And most of these migrants don't have the money, because in the old days, if you were going to cross the river, it was $100. Today, and I'm giving you average here because every smuggling organization
No,
is
we need to
different,
have
but
this. Yeah, we need
it's
to know this information.
$2,500 to cross if you're a Mexican citizen. This is just the river in South Texas. If you are Central American, it's $3,000. If you're Chinese, it's $5,000. That's just across the river. Chinese are going up to $35,000 if, depending upon how far back down
Wow.
to Ecuador they're charged when they make their trip. And then if you're Russian or Middle Eastern, $9,000. None of them have this kind of money. So this is what you're seeing as the process that's in place on these migrants. Then they cross. They're told to rip off the bands, which is why they litter the ground in South Texas. And then they turn themselves into Border Patrol. From there, Border Patrol turns them over to Health and Human Services, who move them all across the country. And then what the cartel did is they snuck in their own operatives who went with these people all over the nation, right? As our government moved them. And then now what did you see today for the first time, yesterday, that came out from a Health and Human Services director, deputy director, who admitted that the government was now working as a middleman. We have been screaming about this since February of 2021.
I remember that.
So what you are really witnessing here, and I know this doesn't hit well, and I get it, but it is what it is, and I call it like it is. I don't care. I'm not here to worry about your feelings and everything else. We're looking at America's new slave trade, plain and simple.
Yeah, that's exactly what it is. And it was, I couldn't. I mean, I wasn't shocked or surprised, but I couldn't believe that he literally sat there under oath. And Mayorkas tells the senators, "Oh yeah, no, I don't know what that is. I'm just clueless." I'm like, "Are you kidding me?"
I briefed Senator Cruz on that last year, and that's how he learned about it. He and Chip Roy. And when I heard the secretary make that statement, you have to understand, I know the intelligence collection in Texas very well. The DHS INA, Intelligence and Analysis Division personnel, were assigned to us in our State Fusion Center. So I can assure you, let me be very clear so there's no misunderstanding. These wristbands are well documented in intelligence and analysis, both highly classified reports and unclassified.
He should have known. He needs to be fired, removed, impeached, whatever it is. And it's really, really sad. One of the other things, and I think that there's been a lot of attention to right now, is the unaccompanied minors. Chip Roy tweeted out, I guess, a couple of days, maybe it might have been last week, about it was 85,000. Why is nobody asking about the 85,000 unaccompanied minors? And so if you remember back, I guess it was it was during Trump's administration, AOC goes down to the border and she, becomes known for this picture. She's like, oh, like the unaccompanied minors. Jaeson, this is one thing. I had a lady that came to me and she said, Bianca, you talk about all this illegal immigration stuff. And she's like, I get it. Cause she was illegal, for a time. And I try to educate them as much as I can. And so she came to me and she said, her son was hanging around with some kid at school. And she said, I didn't know who that son or who that kid was, but my kid's talking to him all the time and they had a party. And so she said, I learned from you. And I told my husband, I'm going to go to the party with my son because he wanted to go to his friend's party. And she said, I wasn't going to let my kid go by himself. I needed to know who these people he was going to be around. And mind you, so she goes to the party and she comes and she says, Bianca, you're not going to believe this story. And she tells me about the little kid that her son is friends with, and the sister. It's a kid. It's a boy, and he's like maybe 9, and the sister's maybe 12. And she says, Bianca, you're not going to believe the story that they told me. And I said, what did they tell you? She said, well, they're with relatives right now. Well, she thinks, she's like, I don't even know if it's the real relatives, but they're with some family. She said they came here without their parents. but they know how to speak English. They might have been from Guatemala, and their mother taught them English before they came. And anyhow, she said that these kids were uh, the mother sent them here for a better life. But what happened is the little girl was telling her story about how she got raped over and over and over on her journey here. And the little boy was telling her, because she was like, she didn't even know what to say. I mean, what do you say to that? And she says, the little boy was saying, she was like, she asked the little boy, well, what did you do? And he's like, well, I couldn't do anything. I mean, they would have killed us. And that, he basically explained the journey, how he had to watch his little sister get raped over and over. And how once they crossed into the United States, they been put in, and this was the crazy thing. She says, I didn't believe this, Bianca, but they were in a container for approximately 3 months. And I said, what? And she said, yeah, and they moved them. They moved them around, but they were in a container. So I don't know how they're describing this to her, but they're telling her that they're in a container. And then they finally took them to a house where they described that you couldn't move. It was like, shoulder to shoulder.
Yeah.
And they took the little girl upstairs and left the little boy downstairs, but they took the girl upstairs and put her in a room. And this, she says she describes this like nasty looking man, tells her, hey, be ready for me. I'll be back for you on Sunday. So she knew that she was going to be raped again. And so she tells her story and says, I prayed to God. I prayed, if there is a God, please, get me out of this. And she said Sunday came, what she thought was Sunday. And she said Sunday came and they knocked on her door, and she just was crying because she knew what was coming. But she said a younger guy walked in and told her to grab her stuff. Let's get ready to go. And she says, I'm sorry, what? And so when she answers in English, the young man tells her, you know how to speak English? And she says, yes. You've known how to speak English the whole time? And she says, yes. So they didn't know that. They didn't know she spoke English, the whole time. And so anyway, he says, don't say anything. Don't speak English right now. Don't let him know you speak English. You're going to come with me, hold my hand, and I'm going to get you out of here. And she was like, what? And she says, but my little brother's downstairs. She's like, we'll grab him. So she was able to grab her little brother, and they turned him into family members. But the whole point of this, Jaeson, is that she was in awe because I think people don't want to believe that this is happening, or they think that we're just telling stories, or it might have been just one person. But she now actually herself, she was like, Bianca, everything that you talk about is true. And I'm like, what did you think I was making up? She goes, I didn't think you were lying, but I now I've witnessed, she says, the tragedy of these kids. She says, and how is this little girl ever going to forget this, what she's been put through? 12 years old, Bianca, she was raped over and over. She says she cried. The little girl was crying, trying to tell her a story. And I said, this is the reality of what is happening. And I want you to just, close this out a little bit. I mean, we're almost done, but close it out on the reality of what is happening to these unaccompanied minors. And now they're missing. We don't even know where they're at. And just before you tell me that, there was another story locally here in the Houston area. There was an officer who worked in missing persons. And there was this big, huge thing that apparently all these Washington people came in to talk to the mayor and these people in Houston, and brought them in. And there was, a bunch of arguing and yelling and screaming in this meeting, Jaeson, because apparently this officer who stumbled in real time, he kept getting his missing reports. He's like, he kept getting him. He was following through and doing his job. But then he started to figure that there was a pattern in the missing reports. And the missing reports were coming all from this little triangle place, and it was all apartment complexes. And so he started to really follow up on it. And what they found was that these children weren't getting fingerprinted at the border, and they were brought in with the NGOs, and they had these designated apartment complexes. They gave them, they handed these unaccompanied minors to these I don't know, like some kind of caretaker person, and that person could apply for the benefits, right? Like food stamps and stuff. And so they weren't reporting these kids missing because they give them 30 days in case the kid goes missing. So all of a sudden, as the time goes by, now these people have to report the kids are not there. Well, the kids were being moved all along.
Right.
So, like, say in a 30-day period, you've got kids coming and going. Meanwhile, this person's getting all these benefits and they don't know where the kids went, or they do, or they don't. Who knows? They're not going to say. And so this officer said, we have all these missing kids that are missing from these apartment complexes, and nobody knows where they went. And you ask the person that's supposed to be the caretaker, and they said, well, they left and never returned. Are you kidding me? You're going to lead me to believe they just left your house and you don't know who they left with and they never returned. But yeah, you took in, 2 or 3 more unaccompanied minors. And the next day you took, 2, 3 more. Mm-hmm. And it was a revolving circle. And that's what happened. And no one wants to talk about that. And so the Biden administration wanted to make sure that they swept it all under the rug and they did some little operation and they try to go and try to find these unaccompanied minors. And Jaeson, so they said, we've located, there was, I don't know, I'm just going to throw a number. I don't even think this is the right number, but just say there was 85 missing kids. And they said, we recovered 55 of them, just say. And they're like, okay, this is better now. We've recovered 55. Well, first of all, how do you know who you really recovered? If they weren't fingerprinted, how do you know those were the actual kids? There's no photographs of them. There's no fingerprints of them. So all you could have had is another, 55 unaccompanied minors that came in and you rotated them in and gave them and said, here they are. These are the missing ones. So this is how serious this is. There is missing kids around this country and nobody knows what's happening to them. Nobody knows where they're at. So Jaeson, how serious is this? And what are the numbers right now? Because I think you told me that we're at, Chip Roy's numbers.
I think it's a great question because it's in the news right now, for one. Second is that the numbers are absolutely tremendous. And earlier you made the statement that, you think it's almost too much for people to handle. And I can tell you, somebody that's been reporting on these cartels for a very long time, that you're absolutely right. What is happening with transnational crime and with the trafficking of people, it's just too much for a lot of Americans to even wrap their minds around. And I want to give you the numbers here. Now, anyone can go on the CBP website, and this isn't rocket science, and you can look it up under unaccompanied alien children to see the numbers yourself, but I'll give them to you right now. In 2023, in the last 6 months, U.S. Customs and Border Protection have taken in custody 70,016 unaccompanied alien children in 6 months. That's where we are. In 2022, 152,057, and in 2021, 146,925, for a total of 368,998. Now look, there is no government agency or organization that can handle numbers like that. Take this many kids into custody across a 2,000-mile stretch of just the southern border. We're not talking about your northern border or your coastal borders right now. At your southern border, hand them over to another agency, Health and Human Services, who then pushes them throughout the country and then hands them over to multiple agencies and keep up with the vetting process to make sure that everything was done correctly. I'll promise you, we are going to find out. If you think it's bad now, get ready. Get ready for how bad this is going to get. You can't blame these agencies because these agencies are dealing with the failed policy. Mm-hmm. The problem is the blowback of what is coming from this is going to absolutely be tremendous, and as it should be. We're going to have hundreds of thousands of these kids in the next 2 years, if you look back at the totality of it, that are going to be missing. We're already at, what did you say? I think you said the number was 80 or 85,000 that they're worried about right now.
Yeah, look, Chip Roy tweeted that out last week, I believe. It said, where are the 85,000 unaccompanied minors?
Get ready. This is going to get worse. We're about to see a massive surge as Title 42 ends. All the plazas are full of people. In the last 48 hours alone in Brownsville, Texas, one city, men and women of Border Patrol have apprehended over 4,400 people. I broke the story this morning of a cage full of unaccompanied alien children. Got it out on national television to show you what it looks like when you have this level of a border failure. So these issues are going to start compounding themselves, and through the natural course of time, the great thing about this is all truth is revealed. And All we have been reporting and showing, and it's the reason I do what I do, I will tell you, I don't say anything on national television or even here or privately unless I can prove it, because we have all been lied to by the media. We've been lied to by our government organizations and agencies. And that's why I go to the border and I get video of it. And even then, they still tell me I'm lying and making it up. So, you know, truth still matters. We're going to get this fixed. And don't for a second let anyone tell you out there that this isn't fixable, because it absolutely is. But I will also tell you, we're going to have to get real tough, real quick, real fast, because this kinder and gentler shit that we've been pulling ain't going to cut it.
Well, you can sign me up when it's time to get ready, because I mean, I have been the strongest advocate and voice. I
Well
think our
said. Yeah, you really
organization,
have. You really
yeah,
have.
our organization, I don't, this feeling thing, I'm like, poor people, I get it, but I advocate against illegal immigration. I advocate against citizenship. I advocate against, amnesty. Our organization is very tough on that. We're probably one of the only, actually the only Hispanic organization out there that does. I don't know any other organizations, that do that, but because I know how serious this is. And people tell me all the time, Jason, they said, "Oh, Bianca, but you're so not compassionate." I said, "And really? I'm not compassionate to all the women and children who are being raped to get here? I'm not compassionate for that? Oh, I'm so sorry. What is compassionate nowadays?
Yeah.
Because
Yeah.
that's who I'm advocating for, is the people who can't speak for themselves. That's who I'm advocating for. This is why legal immigration is important. And our immigration system is broken. I get it. It's not easy to get here, so these people put
Sure. Yeah.
themselves through this. But there's all kinds of, it's not just, they didn't, most of them now, they're being paid to come, or they're being told to come, or so there's a whole lot of other stuff, dynamics that are going on in those other countries. But Jason, you're right, and I'm glad you're telling me, because I really have been feeling that we're at a point of no return, and that there is no way to fix it. But you're telling me that there is, and so you're giving me and my audience hope that, along with right leadership and the right people in place, that we can resolve what is happening at the border, and really, take down this entity that has come against this cartel, and doing those three simple things. Is that we're going to need to get tougher, and I'm thankful for your work, and I know everybody
Thank
else
you.
out there that is watching, is going to be thankful for putting your life on the line to bring us truth and to be covering these stories, because not every, obviously, look, there's a lot of independent journalists out there trying to do this, Jason, and we still can't get it across America to know what's really going on. So
yeah, it's well said. And Bianca, it was great seeing you in Florida. You're absolutely right. You've been an incredible advocate, and thank you for all your work as well. It's been good to be with you today. And look, we're going to get this fixed. It's going to get worse before it gets better, but then get ready, because the last thing you're going to want to be is a cartel member anywhere in the world, because the best of the best are going to be coming for them.
Well, amen to that, Jason. I love that. And Jason, where can people find you, follow you? I know that you've had censorship issues as well, where people try to shut you down because they don't want you to expose what's going on. Where can people follow you, and how can they find you?
Sure. You can find me at jasonjones.com. That's JAESON Jones.com.
Perfect. And then they can figure out how to find you on social media from there.
You bet. I'm all
Amazing.
over that.
Thank you, Jason. I know you're a very, very busy person. Obviously, it's everything you've talked about here. I can imagine it's your days are very crazy, but I really thank you and appreciate you for coming on Stand Up, Stand Out America tonight. So, guys, you've heard it here straight from Jason Jones, the expert on what is exactly happening at our southern border. I thank you, and I say, on behalf of everybody, Jason, please stay safe out there, and that you can call on us at any point in time if you need something, or you need us to get a word out, message out, apply pressure, on our elected officials if you're trying to get a message across. And Jason, I'll be seeing you again this weekend. We are going to be out in Austin for the Moms for America. How many more? That's how many more do we have to go? How many more women and children have to die? How many more women and children have to be raped? So, Jaeson, I look forward to seeing you this weekend, and stay safe out there. And I thank you so much again for being on with us.
You as well, and tell your husband I said hello, and thank you as always, Bianca. If you need anything, don't hesitate to reach out. Take care.
Thank you, Jaeson. I appreciate you. Much love.